Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and we're here for part two of the show, talking about the offense against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. Joining me again is Fraser Tafar. Fraser, how you doing?
Doing good, Ken. Glad to be on for part two of the offensive show. Really good stuff in the first show, especially talking about how Lamar ran the Ravens out of some pressures, not really using rush, but out of passing sets especially, and our continued success in the red zone. I think these things have definitely improved our offense over the past 5 weeks on this winning streak, and glad to get in on some of the offensive line play.
Yeah, lots of good stuff from that first episode. Other couple of things I'd point to are the fact that the Buccaneers only used 4.15 defensive backs per play, and all of the things that trickled down from that. The Ravens could have gone very heavy to try and counter that. They didn't. They could have used a lot of set and chip blockers. They didn't. But there's just a lot of stuff about how heavy the Bucs played, how heavy they committed to stop the run, and still allowed 244 rushing yards. But how heavy they committed to the run that really influenced how the game played out in game script, the remarkable game that Lamar Jackson had relative to his opportunity set, which we detailed. And I think one of the most interesting points is that the Ravens they can find ways to beat themselves on some offensive drives, and we kind of went through that. They didn't really otherwise get beat by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after that first drive.
Yeah, and it's been a common theme throughout the year, even back to the two losses, like we mentioned in the last podcast. I think this team is built to continue to score points unless they stop themselves, and it's been evident past this winning streak for sure. But moving on to offensive line performances, what did you think of Ronnie Stanley this week? I think he looked pretty good, but what's your take?
Yeah, it was a good game for Stanley. I've seen some over positive notes about his play, but I thought he was good. 54 plays, 50 blocks, 2 missed blocks in this game, 2 pressures allowed. And I know PFF had him for 0. I had him as feet in the cone, and actually there was evidence that Lamar Jackson was impacted by it. So I thought that I scored him for 2 full pressures in that regard. He had the holding call, which we all know that I have a much more serious weighting on than PFF does. I think PFF knows they're underweighted. They will probably come around and create a new system that I think has a better imputed weights of various events, but that was a pretty serious problem. 0.76 was a score with an adjustment, which he had some very positive elements that he did. He graded out as a B for me. Again, if you grade a B, that's excellent. Think of that as a contribution above a league average number. If you can play at a league average value, that has value. That'd be a C in my system. But if you can play above it, you're kind of making a contribution each week to kind of like a bank account of play. It was much easier to think of this when PFF used to score and show you their cumulative scoring for the year. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you still had it back then, but they showed you their whole total of pluses and minuses that a player had accumulated for a year. And a player like Stanley, it might be plus 20 or something for a year. Well, think of a B as he's contributing a plus 3 maybe to that total for the year. And if you put together 6 of those, that's how you get the plus 20. And it doesn't really take that much. So he had 6 blocks in level 2. We're still seeing great mobility from Ronnie. Which I think is the nice thing. I really loved his block on the second play of the game on the screen pass to Flowers, yep. Where he got out in space and that poor defensive back drove him right out of bounds. He made both of his pulls, had 3 highlight blocks, including the second and third plays of the game. If you want to go back and just say, well, I just want to see 2 of them, those are the easiest 2 to find. So really good plays. And another good game from Ronnie. He's just stacking plus games all through this year, and he certainly is playing at an all-pro level at this point.
Yeah, and I think I can agree with you on that. He's seemed to be in form, at least to the best of his ability, pre-injury. With that being said, what do you think the prospects of us re-signing him are after this season?
Pretty difficult. I wouldn't assign a very high probability to it. The Ravens have a lot of players they need to sign. They have a lot of players they need to sign early this offseason. And it's not going to make any of that easy, and they're going to have to make some tough choices. And I'm afraid they're going to part ways with at least 1 very popular player and maybe 3. Patrick McCary is not signed for next year. Do they want to try and bring him back? Is there a contract that both sides can agree to that would make sense, or does somebody else want him as an offensive tackle on one side, such that he would have some value to somebody else? Next year Patrick Ricard is not signed. What do they do about that? Really don't know. And then obviously Ronnie Stanley, and then there's a whole host of third-year players where this is your best chance to sign them to long-term deals. And I just think the money gets scarce pretty quickly. So you have to figure out what positions can you cover with draft capital instead of a big second or third contract. And in the case of, say, Ricard or McCary or Stanley, what can they otherwise handle with draft capital? And as always, you can't say, I don't even want to be bothered by the cap, or they shouldn't be constrained by the cap. You got to try and understand the cap. Yeah. You really have to. And obviously I'm not talking to you, Frazier, but people who say, I don't want to hear about the cap. Why do they get to have 4 players and we only get to have 3 kind of thing? Well, it's because you build along a very levelized performance basis, and you that's the way it works. It's just all I can say. The Ravens have a very high cash spend every year. They're very good at budgeting their money year over year, so they constantly have a winner on the field. That's what I want. If you don't want it, we're probably on opposite sides of the fence to start with. But in any case, I don't honestly believe the chance of signing Ronnie is all that great.
And I think the other thing that probably aids him not being re-signed is the rise of Rosengarten at the right tackle, only because that gives the Ravens the flexibility to spend draft capital this year on a left tackle. Granted, we're go ahead.
Or move Rosengarten there potentially. I mean, I think that was supposed to be the plan anyway.
He looks so good at right tackle. It's almost like you don't want to take him out of his groove and make him right with his left hand. I don't know. Even though left tackle is his strong suit, but I don't know. He's looking good at right tackle. It's kind of hard.
It's not an easy choice to make, but he's more about feet and less about anchor. And unless you're going to go out and get a top guy, I don't really I wouldn't want to have a Faalele who has a great anchor, but it's not quick enough to handle the left side over there. I'd rather have a guy who, frankly, like Ronnie Stanley, has had not that great an anchor over his career, gets pulled back into the quarterback from time to time, but Lamar handles that sort of pressure very well. So I would be inclined to move him to the left based on what I've seen so far. I don't know if we're going to have enough good by the end of the year to be really comfortable. 2025 is a year he's going to really be ready to do it.
Fair. With that being said, moving on to left guard, what do you think about Patrick McCary's performance this week?
Very, very bad. He had 2 holding penalties. You really can't recover from that in my system. It's just too significant and negative. It's -10 for those 2 plays. He was part of one of the sacks, half portion of it, and I'm going to go back to exactly what happened on that play. He was beaten inside by the Levante David blitz, and he was PC'd as it happened. Some of it was lunging, and then Levante David might have helped him to the ground for the last little bit. But in any case, that wasn't good. He did have a third of a pressure that he was involved in. Only missed 2 blocks, so it was a good game from that perspective. He's been very good about not missing blocks. The last 2 weeks, he had spectacular games, A- and an A the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
So he went into this game with a very long leash of poor play available to him, and he used up a portion of that. Maybe he used up 25% or 20% of that total, but I still think we're about 4 games of this level of play from seeing them go back to Voorhees at left guard. And this was a D game for McCary as I scored it. 0.65 is how it worked out in terms of points per play. Even with an adjustment, he's just into the D range, about 3 points into the D range. Did have 5 level 2 blocks. He led the team with 2 pancakes in this game. One of the things that's been nice about his play is he made all his pulls, 3 out of 3 on pulls. Nobody else on the Ravens right now is playing guard, and that includes the 2 guys. Voorhees and Faalele are effective making pulls. They haven't been doing it. So
yeah, especially Faalele.
Yeah, Faalele went 1 out of 3 in this game doing it, but it's just not his natural thing. Some players are good at some things and others, but it's not his thing. McCary, I think there's reasonable hope that being a system guy, that he understands the footsteps of the Dallas Sanders era as they were taught to him, and will continue to be pretty good at converting on pulls.
Yeah, and I don't really. McCary's I don't know how much pop Voorhees gives you compared to McCary, only because McCary has the NFL experience and, like you said, the legacy understanding of the offense. It just makes him that much more quicker and impactful right now compared to Voorhees, who's someone really trying to continue to figure it out in the league.
And that's normal. But you want to, I want the developmental value from Voorhees as well. I don't think there's ever really a terrible time to get developmental value, because you whenever you take it, you're kind of making a compromise on the level of play you're getting. But I think the compromise they're currently making is they're taking risk with McCary out there every play. Yes. When if they had McCary on the bench, then he'd be your backup tackle, and he'd be available when you needed him, at least the first time. Very true.
Very true. So now that we're done with McCary, onto our All-Pro center. What did you think about Linderbaum?
Tough game for Lindy this week, and I can stretch to find some positives, but basically the negatives were so bad that it's very hard to overcome. So 54 plays, 47 blocks, 4 missed. He had 1/3 of a penetration, so that was on a run play that he was 1/3 responsible for. 1/3 of a pressure, again, shared that with Faalele and McCary. The interior offensive line really did not have a good game here. The big play was the snap that went into Flowers' head. And I'm just going to tell you how this played out scoring wise as I did it. And then you could decide if you think that Linderbaum doesn't deserve all these negative points for that play. But he got a -6 on the play. I treated it the same as a sack. It was a loss of 18. Okay. What I saw on the tape was that Lamar called for the football. Linderbaum did not respond. Lamar called for the football again. Linderbaum then responded, and the ball went into the head of Flowers and off into the wild blue yonder from there, where Jackson eventually tracked it down. Didn't really have any way out of the play for other than
almost ran into the ref again.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great when that happened before. But it was a frustrating result, and I think it's worthy of a -6. It's the second -6 he's gotten on a snap in what, the last 3 weeks, I think.
All the way dating back to Cincy.
Yeah, it was Cincinnati that he snapped it off his foot. The other penalty that he got was an IDP. Now, an IDP is a 5-yard penalty, but it's also a 5-yard penalty with a defensive option. And it's never good to give the opponent a defensive option. I don't want to pretend like it's as bad as the 4 holding calls the offensive line had in this game. Plus, there's 2 other 10-yard penalties which were declinable on Likely and Flowers, right?
Yep, on the outside.
Of their blocks. But it was not good. It was not a good game for him. 36.67 points, 0.68, which is really bad for a center. With a 5-point adjustment, he got up to the bare minimum for a D-. And he had 3 blocks in level 2, made 3 out of 4 pulls. Those are good things. It's not like I think he's not helping the run game. I think he did a good job on that. Most of what he did in this game that was bad was in the passing game that he really hurt the team. He did have the 1 penetration, but I'd say otherwise good run blocking game, very poor pass blocking and snapping game.
Yeah, it's been I don't want to call it a concern right now, but it's been a little upsetting that Linderbaum has had these issues with snapping, and Lamar and him maybe not being 100% in sync on when the ball is coming out. And maybe that is a product of Lamar getting to the line and yapping and trying to get protections ready to go. And under Roman's offense, it was like you get to the line at 10 and then snap it. But now it's more so Lamar probably has to get the timing down a little more on when to get to the line, cadence of the calls, and then snapping, because he's someone that doesn't care if it goes down to 0. He'll snap it at 0.0, 0.5. So he's good about doing that. I think it's tough to put a guy like Linderbaum in that situation. He's all pro, but still, like, he's human at the end of the day. He's trying to get calls in and trying to speed up his mental process as well, just like Lamar. So errors can happen under those circumstances.
I did want to say one more thing about the Linderbaum thing, and I always want to lay this out there so people kind of understand the framework here. That 6-point loss there, and it's really a 7-point loss because he could have gotten a block on that play, but instead of getting 1, he got -6 effectively. So it's really like 7 points that he lost out on. He would have actually had a B- in this game instead of a D- from that one play alone. But hey, an 18-yard drive stalling loss, that's about what should be a 2-grade differential, frankly, in terms of what's going on. So it's fairly obvious that at least to me, from a weighting perspective, that's in the ballpark. I could listen to all sorts of other arguments about whether it was 100% his fault or 0% of his fault, and actually believe it's somewhere in the middle. But B- and D-, those are your two goalposts on what Linderbaum's outcome was for this game. If it was not his fault at all, it's a B-. If it was 100% his fault, it's a D-. If it was some portion his fault, it's in between. But that is the way I looked at it. And I did not yet ask Gordon McGuinness to tell me from PFF how they had scored it on that play. But my guess is from a low pass blocking grade he got for the game that they probably targeted him for it, or they probably charged it to him.
Fair. So with Linderbaum not having a really good game, what do you think about his running mate next to him at right guard, Faalele?
Yeah, tough game for the big man here. He made 40 out of 54 blocks, had 11 misses in this game. He has gone around and been mystifying in his inability to put the elements together. Last week, I thought maybe he'd really turned the corner because he had a great pass blocking game. In fact, he had a perfect game as I scored it as a pass blocker, not one negative event. Then this week he comes out, and it's not as much the pressure events. He did have a half a pressure and a third of a pressure on 2 different plays. That's not the end of the world. You can get through a game, even a low snap game like this, and be okay. It's the 11 missed blocks. It's the some of them he's moving to level 2. Some of he's getting beat on the line of scrimmage. Some of it's run plays. Some of it's pass plays. There just is no cohesive single thread I can draw through it. I would say, oh, I see. You can just fix this and it'll be fine. There's nothing like that. It's just a whole lot of inexperience at playing guard and a general level of slowness that I think Tampa Bay was able to take advantage of with a lot of Todd Bowles' trickery in the blitz. So maybe that's a common thread, but that's picking up that's like learning how to play offensive line. You can't just snap your fingers and make that happen. He did have the offensive holding call in this case, so that I'll toss that one in for him. That was a 5-point deduction. So if he had not been charged, he got an F and finished at 0.64, which is 3 points short of score of passing, a D- at right guard. But if he had gotten those 5 points, I'll just do this real quickly. It'd be 37.33 over 54. He'd have been at 69 with the same adjustment of 0.04. He would have been at 73. He would have been, I think, a C- in the game without that bogus holding call. So as bad as this game was, the kind of maybe the positive I can pull forward from Faalele is he's not falling off the table in terms of this. I mean, there haven't been a whole bunch of James Hurst at right tackle games or O'Neal Cousins games where he just doesn't show up at all. It's like he forgot to come to work that day. He's trying. He's just not getting the job done a lot of the time.
Yeah, even on that screen pass touchdown to Justice Hill, I mean, the whole offensive line was out in front, but Faalele didn't even touch anybody until the goal line. But
there wasn't really. It was a funny thing about that. They have 4 guys out in front. I've never seen that before. I've never seen 4 guys for the Ravens out in front of a screen pass, and it was just everything about the timing. It was gorgeous. I mean, it was pretty clear to me. He there was almost no chance of him failing to get in the end zone. But the only 2 guys who connected were Stanley and Linderbaum. The McCary and Faalele. They had guys cruising in from the right, DBs cruising in from the right, but it would have been a really hard move for them to get there and still help Hill on the play. It would have been it was a difficult reach for them. We saw Faalele way downfield in front of a block, and I'm forgetting if it was last game or the week before, but he's 30 yards down the field on one of the Henry runs, I think. Might have been a Lamar run, but either way, left side run. He was way down in front of it on the play, and he never did connect on a block.
I think I remember that. Yeah.
So it's nice to see. I want to see the effort, mostly from in terms of his level 2 blocking. He needs short area decisiveness. That's what he needs. He needs to process quickly, figure out who he's going to block, and then move to do it. And he doesn't actually have to put a hand on the guy. He's so big. If you force the guy to move around him, and he had several blocks credited in this game where he never touched the opponent. Okay. It's just a matter of he forced them to go around them by so much that he took them out of the play. And he's got that kind of size, but it's not it's not being applied consistently enough. And he had an A last week. He certainly earned himself some leash. He used up a third of that leash or more in this game, having a bad game. I would think if he were to have 2 more games like this, I think that the Ravens would be looking to find a replacement. I don't think they could. I don't think they'd put up with 2 more games like this.
I would want it. I would love to agree with you, but I don't think Ben Cleveland's getting that nod anymore. I don't know what he has to do to get.
How about Voorhees moving back in? How about you move Voorhees back in at left guard and you move McCary over the right side or vice versa?
That could be interesting. But then going back to your point, you want to keep McCary in the most valuable spot and was on the bench in terms of replacement. Yeah. So almost like that wouldn't make too much sense. I'm not too sure. The synopsis, It does make sense, but for the effectiveness of long term, because Voorhees started at left guard this year, and then you're moving him to right guard. That's just messing up with his development. So I don't know. It's really pick your poison at that point.
I'm not moving. Oh, right. Voorhees. You said Voorhees. Okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about Faalele and moving into left guard. He's not playing.
Oh, no.
He's not playing anywhere else. Yeah. You see, because Ravens still have a right-handed run game, no matter how much that crack toss is a big part of what they do. They still have a right-handed run game. You can't have Faalele being the primary puller.
For sure.
All right.
So done with Faalele. Moving on to Roger. What did you think of the rookie's performance this week?
Yeah, it was okay. It wasn't perfect, but I'd say it was more in line with his first couple of games there. I probably, of all the players, I thought that the grade, he was the one that got too high a grade for what I think his performance really was. So I'll just talk through it really quickly. 54 plays, 49 blocks. He missed 3. He allowed 1 pressure as I scored it. I noticed that PFF had him scored for 2, so I'm going to try to find out what's the second one that they have that I didn't.
Might have been that free rusher from Lamar on the Bateman deep throw.
Could be. So it could have been a pickup. Lamar didn't have anybody run out of pressure. That's usually a source of differences between the two of us. But more often than not, I'll score pressure and they won't. So I had 2 for Stanley and they had 0, for example. So I really want to understand what they did. And I'm sure they'll tell me what they did. And then he had 1 sack that was his, and that was when he was beaten to the inside. It would have been a difficult pickup for him, but it was his or nobody's. And so it ends up
on the first drive, right?
Yeah, Diaby beating him to the inside. Yes, on the first drive.
Yeah, that was pretty disappointing.
Yeah, it's a bummer, but it was a matter. What happened there was really processing him not be able to figure out quickly enough what was going on, as opposed to the other player making a great play and being just too quick. It was 25% that, but it was probably 75% if he didn't process quickly enough how he needed to move to cover his inside. All right, let's see, 41 points in total. Missing only 3 blocks is good at tackle. By the way, you have a higher rate of missed tackles at tackle because you end up on the backside of running plays where it's hard to make a block at all. But he did a pretty good job when they were zone blocking. He seems to have a pretty good understanding of how to use his back and shoulder to block. I've also noticed that as a positive, by the way, for Faalele, is he knows how to use his back and shoulder to kind of obstruct players who are trying to get by him from trailing the play. So that was good. 2 blocks in level 2. That's nothing to be all that thrilled about. One pancake for Rosengarten, and he's 1 out of 2 on his polls. And I think 1 out of 2 on his polls is all there was about it. It didn't seem good enough in total to be a B, which is what it worked out to, even in a short game like this. But a lot of it came down to he had a low missed block rate in this game, which is positive. It's the 3rd game where he scored exactly at the 81 level, which is at the exact bottom end of the B range. Nothing wrong with that. That is very good. Making 3 positive contributions stacked. talked about this with Stanley. That's a positive thing, but he hasn't been overwhelmingly positive yet. I think we've just seen some small positives in 3 out of his 4 starts to think, hey, yeah, there is a chance this guy could play left tackle in 2025.
And he's definitely playing above league replacement level, which is what
he's playing above. He's probably in total. I'd say he's playing above league average.
Yes, 100%, and that's what we can ask for at this point with a rookie. He's developing at his first year. I think this is a good place for him. Roger has impressed me so far this year. I think the continued reps, the snaps, is the only thing that's going to continue to get him better. I think he's holding his own. I really cannot wait to see this matchup against Pittsburgh and how this offensive line can really hold up and make their money, because they're going to have their hands full with that defensive line front.
Yeah, it certainly will. You got a lot of players who require a double team and not enough to deal with all of that, certainly. But that'll be fun, and we'll see, what added pressure the Steelers mix into that. And there always seems to be something that Tomlin is really the guy who is in charge of the defense. I think he is still their defensive play. Yeah, he's still the defensive play caller. So he's I thought so, right? Is it they have a I could be wrong. And he's in charge of the defense. That's the reason he's there. His side of the ball is the defense. So the question is he calling the plays or not anymore? And I thought Alex Kozora was telling me he might have been just designing the game plan, or he might have been calling the plays, but I thought he was calling the plays.
That might be new news to me.
Okay. Let me, I hate spreading disinformation. So I'm going to look up Steelers defensive coordinator right now and see who they have. Well, Terrell Austin is the defensive coordinator here. And
he's probably like the senior advisor or something, executive advisor.
He may be. The key thing to do is when the Ravens play the Steelers, see if he's got a play sheet in his hand and if he's blocking his mouth.
Fair.
And if he does, then we know.
Fair.
All right. I do feel like I ought to know that, but we are where we are. Okay, well, that's anyway. Nobody came in as a 6th offensive lineman, so that's all the grades on the offensive line this week. Let's move in and talk about some of the skill position players. I know we hit on some of the usage in the first part, but we certainly didn't hit on all of it. Who'd you like to talk about?
Let's talk about the main guy, Rashad Bateman. He had a big breakout game, 4 catches for 132, 123.
Yeah. You got me on that. It might be 120, but let's see. All right, let's get this right. 121. Yeah.
121 and a touchdown. Beautiful throw by Lamar. Was it like 40 some yards? He has, even though it was 4 catches, but the just connection is very evident at this point, especially on that scramble play, on that blitz. Lamar rolls right, and it's almost like before Rashad even turned around, he put it in the spot where he was going to be. So very, very encouraging to see that. And the thing I like the most is Flowers had a huge game last week, and now Bateman has a huge game this week. It just bodes well for Monk and the offense going into these matchups week in, week out, because defense just don't know who is going to get the ball. They know who the main guys are, Henry and Lamar, but the supporting cast is just very deep right now. And it's proving itself, especially a guy like Rashad Bateman, who can take this offense to a whole different level if he's unlocked.
Yeah. It's been so exciting to watch his play. And it's unfortunately, Bateman will not continue to play at this high level. And the reason is not that Bateman isn't highly skilled. He's the best route runner on the team. The mild mismatch of between Bateman at the break on the top of the stem and how much value he could add there if he had a quarterback who really liked to throw the ball at the break or before the break. Lamar's not that quarterback, but Bateman is now running his routes all the way through, and Lamar, I think, gained trust through that. Now, they could be they're working more together. Certainly could be that. I really believe the big thing that's different is that Bateman keeps trying as the plays extended, and that was a big deal in this game. Lamar had one of those situations. He had a number of times in his career where he saw back eyeballs for defensive back Bateman. And he just waved him to a certain point of the field, and then he threw it there. And it's almost like throwing before the break in that situation, because the only guy who could react to that football in time was Bateman.
Yep.
To get to that spot. And we've seen it. I'll go back to another play from his rookie season when he did that same thing to Miles Boykin. And there was some guy who came out with a video about this and kind of was ridiculing me for thinking there's no way Lamar Jackson is thinking, throwing to the back shoulder on this. And that's not what I was saying exactly. I was saying it's the touchdown to Boykin in the Miami game. I think it was about an 8-yard touchdown where he got
when he was fading.
Driven. Yeah, he's fading way back. You're right. It was more fading than going all the way to the right sideline, but he was fading way back. And then he threw it up to the point in the end zone. We saw him do the exact same thing with Likely, just basically 2 weeks ago. And he hits him in the back side of the end zone. There's some national guy who was like, no, that's not what was happening, whatever. Because Lamar was new to the league and we didn't know yet. And now we know what the MO is. Now we know it's back eyeballs is the winning slot machine payout for a long play, for a big play on extended Lamar. So anyway, I love the fact that the trust seems to be there. The trust was there on the deep ball. Now, did it really get tested? No, not really, because he had it beat by 5 yards.
Yeah, as soon as that safety stepped up on that cover 3, I think it was a buzz look. I mean, Lamar knew it was over. Yeah.
I mean, and I completely agree. I did think that Bateman made that happen with his route running in a way that made it extremely apparent to Lamar. So it was really, it's like the secondary component of the route. He wasn't at the top of the stem making some stop and go move or some out and go or in and go or anything like that. Or slant and go. He went go, and then he turned towards the sideline to kind of fake the 7 route.
Yep.
And then he he went deep. Yeah. So beautiful. And you don't see that kind of route running very often. It was very evident to Lamar, and he got the job done. But he didn't really test it in the way that we kind of hope to see, like throwing the ball up and letting Beckham, come down with it kind of thing, or letting Andrews come down with it, or letting Likely come down with it. He just trusts those guys more.
Very true. And the ironic thing about that touchdown is, I think it was a play or two before that, they showed a single high again, and then Rashad Bateman was lone receiver on the outside, and they showed one-on-one coverage, and I'm like, they got to get Bateman the ball deep on this drive or something. And then boom, they hit it in the next 2 plays. It was just to see that adjustment, because they were showing it, but because obviously I was at the game, I could tell on the field what was going on. To see it come to fruition was just amazing in the moment.
Yeah. Very, very, very cool game for Bateman. And this is the kind of game that they can definitely build on. But it won't be one of the things is that I don't believe every game the rest of the season that every team is going to sell out on the run the way that Tampa Bay or Washington did. Both those teams had real weaknesses against the run. There's going to be other teams that are going to play it differently. I think Pittsburgh is going to play it a little differently in terms of how they do it. I think Cleveland will play it a little differently this week. I don't think they're going to sell out entirely at the line of scrimmage to try and stop the run, even though they've got pretty good corners to try and get it done that way. So they could go, man up with 3 corners and try and cover with Newsome and Ward and who am I missing? The third one. Okay. It'll come to me. But anyway, they've got the corners to do it, but they don't. I don't think they will. I think they'll be much more of a spread it out. The other ace up their sleeve they have is JOK, who has been a Ravens killer in recent years. Obviously, he was involved in a Jackson injury in one season. But he's a guy they really cannot have chasing after Jackson. That's one of the few players who's really quick enough and athletic enough to give Jackson fits when he's ever outside the pocket even a little bit. So I'd rather him just throw the ball away than risk JOK getting on top of him like that.
Yeah, honestly, our hardest matchup this year is going to be against the division, because they prepped their whole rosters to beat us. So
yeah, it's a good point.
It's going to be the biggest challenges that we're going to see this year, other than Kansas City probably. So I think it's good to see this, especially to your point. a team like Cleveland and Pittsburgh as well, because they could probably match up outside with us one-on-one with Porter and who's their other corner?
I'm sorry, who did you say? Which team?
Steelers.
The Steelers.
Porter and who else?
Joey Porter and
yeah, he's supposed to be good, right?
Yeah, they have good corners. All right, give me a second. I'll come up with it.
But he's I want to see us successfully beat man against those kind of corners, because beating Washington DBs really doesn't mean anything. I mean, they're a lower part of the league, the lower half of the league in terms of average yards per target, and they got their first interception of the year against us on a fluke play. So I think going against these more stout corners on the outside is really going to tell us where a guy like Zay Flowers is and Rashad Bateman is, because they're going to be going against one of the better competitions they're going to see, and it's almost going to be a playoff-like atmosphere against these teams. Maybe not Cleveland, but definitely against Pittsburgh.
Okay, so Beanie Bishop is the guy who had 2 interceptions, I think, in the last game, and he's kind of a slot corner safety hybrid. At least I think so. Plays probably more slot corner. And then they have another guy, Dante Jackson, who doesn't play all that much. So I'm not sure who. I'm not sure who else we'd be talking about at corner. They do have another outside corner. Now, why can't I figure out who that is? Because Joey Porter is getting.
They acquired him this offseason.
James Pierre. They have James Pierre and Dante Jackson are the 2 guys who are basically splitting that left corner role, and neither of them is good. Now they may have somebody else who's hurt that I'm not thinking of. But anyway, it's hopefully. I would certainly hope that the Ravens would be able to take advantage of a secondary that even with Minkah back there, Minkah's been very unproductive in terms of turnovers for a while. That's been one of the problems. I mean, if you think of a player who's having a tough season, Minkah Fitzpatrick is right there with Marcus Williams. He's probably having a little bit better year, but not a whole lot better year.
Fair.
All right. My turn to bring up a player. I want to bring up a guy who didn't see the field, and that's Tez Walker. They had him on for 11 snaps of special teams. There was an opportunity to get him into this game. Whether you want to bring him in at 34-10 or 27-10 or whatever the right time would have been, there was a time for him to get on the field and play a few snaps. He hasn't, you hear things that he's trying to keep a positive attitude and this and that. I don't know how you aren't pulling your hair out by not being activated for as long as he hasn't. He's been sitting out this year so far. He could, he played 11 snaps of special teams if they liked what they saw, and I'm sure they didn't have a whole lot to go on. Then maybe he's a guy who hangs and is a regular activation who eventually will see a few snaps at wide receiver. But remember, when the Ravens have a one-sided game where they're up by a lot in terms of game script, they're also going to play it heavier at that point. So you're likely to have a one wide receiver set on some of those plays, and that's not likely to be a player like Walker.
Yeah, so the usage of Walker has definitely been underwhelming. I think I just don't know what the plan is. I know he came in as a lanky, not too much of a big body guy. I know he has the height and the speed, but maybe they're taking that developmental route very seriously with him. And the Ravens have a tendency not to really put too much faith in the rookies anyways. Zay Flowers was really the first one to break that mold last year, and it's paid dividends. I don't know. Maybe it's just something we don't see in-house. That might be something they want to make sure they hone in on before they really unleash him on the offensive side.
I think this summer he had a really hard time staying on the field. Yeah, he was more than anybody else. I'd say he was getting like physically picked on by other players. And it was included some guys who, aren't on a roster anywhere right now, as far as I know. Christian Matthew was a guy who took his helmet off almost twice in one practice. He took some other, hard hits as he made a catch or as he was going for a ball on the sideline that you really don't want to see your players hitting each other that way, even in a padded practice. So it was kind of a bummer to see that happen. And then he missed some time. The physical demands of the game for kind of a slender receiver like Walker are not to be trivialized.
Yep. Moving on to my next player. Andrews is someone that really caught my eye this week, especially after really having a quiet beginning of the year. He's under the radar, has had 3 touchdowns these past 2 weeks. He's became, I don't want to say more in tune with the offense, but he's become more of a contributor, extending drives. He's been Mark Andrews, I think, to a lesser volume. I think the main point that you brought up in the last offensive podcast was the deployment between him and Likely. I think they maybe figured out a efficient way to deploy them, especially with the personnel we have on the field, and the mix and match has really paid dividends these past 3 weeks, especially.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, it is going to be a trade-off with Andrews between volume and productivity per target. And it's gone to a fairly extreme degree this year. 2 years ago, he played 15 games. So it's almost exactly twice what he's played this year. He's played 7 years this game, but he had 5 times as many targets. Mm-hmm. Okay. But when you look at productivity per snap, he had 7.5 yards per target. Okay, so that's per target, not per snap. I understand how I went back on myself there. He had a catch rate that was significantly lower. His catch rate was catch rate 64.6%. This year it was his career low. This year he's at 77.3%, a career high, and that's really contributed to a much improved yards per target of 10.3, which is the highest he's been since his rookie year when he set the Ravens record at 11.0. So the fact the Ravens have, now it's either 2 or 3 guys who are over 10 yards per target, because I think Likely is not quite there. They only
Kolar.
have 2. Kolar might be there in low targets. And then Bateman is. Bateman's leading the entire NFL in yards per target right now. I didn't say that, did I, earlier? I meant to.
No, you didn't. I didn't even know that was.
Let's talk about this, because those are the words that I never thought I would hear said.
Yeah, that's very shocking, actually.
But I just looked it up today because I noticed he was up to 13.1 yards per target. And if you set the target limit at 4 targets per game, which is a pretty reasonable baseline number, that's 68 targets in a season. That's no self-respecting wide receiver one would have even 150 would consider himself such in a year where he had less than 150% of that.
Yep.
So anyway, he's got 13.1. There's 2 guys above him. AJ Brown has played in only 3 games, but has 24 targets. So not 4 per game for the Eagles, who've played 7 games, I believe. But he is at 13.5 yards per target. And Alec Pierce, who's having a quiet year that is involved in a lot of big plays, has been targeted 26 times and has 14.7 yards per target. But Bateman is the guy with 30 targets already who leads the entire NFL in yards per target as I defined it. Right behind him, Jamar Chase, Nico Collins, Keon Coleman.
Yeah, it's a great company for
that is
Rashad
some great
Bateman.
Freaking company. Yep. So I meant to say that because that was one of the cool things. I did have it on the radio today. So it's just like it's such an unusual thing to see that a Raven, let alone Rashad Bateman with his history with Lamar Jackson, is in this kind of position.
Yep, that's great to see. I think hopefully it's foreshadowing for what we're going to see later on in the season, especially in the postseason, because that's really when we need someone like Rashad Bateman to step up, be able to win one-on-one coverage, and make it happen for us in the cold weather.
Another reason why I'd like to see a little more of Walker, by the way, is that I think we need to really work hard to preserve, and a little less on Flowers on gadget plays.
Yep.
So we see Mitchell in his place, is that we really need to preserve Flowers and Bateman for the postseason too. They are so critical. There is no depth there that is high quality at all. Tylan Wallace, he can give you a little bit, but he can't give you really any of the really important things that Bateman or Flowers are going to give you in terms of either route running or suddenness. That's just not the player he is. Same thing with Aguilar. You know, a good receiver, had a fine year last year. It'd be great if he could even come close to that again this year. And he's done, you know, some positive things, no question about it. He's just not at the level of either of those other two. So keeping those two healthy is paramount to making this team competitive in the playoffs.
100%. And it's weird having two good receivers on the Ravens. So it's really a blessing right now. Magically, if we were to get that third receiver spot solidified. I know Aguilar has been really contributing, but I know earlier in the season I mentioned to you Tylan Wallace is someone who I'd love to see in that third role. I think he's made some big catches this year, and something I've beaten on the door for all year is having him in that gadget role and more on those jet sweeps and making him a threat, because he might not be as quick and sudden as Zay Flowers, but he can glide. And he can get upfield, and he can do his job, and that's what we really need from those gadget guys.
Yeah, he certainly was a good acquisition, and I wasn't convinced at the time, especially since they had to give up a 6th-round pick to get him because they got one less in the comp formula.
Yep.
I wasn't really a fan of the deal at the time, but he's worked out. He's been really worth the investment there. Tell you what, let's. Are you at all concerned about Isaiah Likely in this game getting 4 targets, 2 catches for 17, or it's just every game is a different star?
I think at this point, especially after seeing Zay Flowers have a career year, 2 games in a row, and then nothing the third game, I think, I think the Ravens probably have a built-in understanding week by week who's going to be the matchup that they want. Obviously, in-game adjustments can change that, but I think they have an idea of who's going to be the main targets going into every single week, and they can deviate when need to.
All right, very cool. We have an interesting question from KMFFL Podcast Network. Kedma Weather, at Kedma Weather is the thing. And he said something, it's an interesting question he's got. Ravens are 3-0 versus the NFC this year, and Lamar's career record as a starter is 23-1. Do you think this is real going forward? ? Ravens were favored in 19 of those games and never played a team that finished with a better record than them. He says, could this be a one last thing episode? So it definitely could be something we talk about there. I think I'll take a crack at answering this now, but would you like to opine on it first, or?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. So when you're favored 19 times out of 23 games, that means you probably take out the 8 games that are the most unfavorable to the Ravens, and you'd say those would approximately balance to 0 points. And I think actually that's probably conservative to assume so. They're only supposed to win 4 of the bottom 8 games. Now, of the top 16 games, how many are they supposed to win? Well, they might be favored by an average of 8 or 9 points in those remaining games. I think that's probably on the outside, if anything. It might be 7.5 very easily. So the chance to win those games is probably between 75 and 80%. But let's be a little conservative and say it's 75%. And in particular, since we have 16 games we're dealing at, we should say they should get another 12 wins out of that. Is this a real thing going forward? The Ravens have massively outperformed what could be expected of this. Do I think it's a real effect? Let's take a crack at that. I don't think mathematically, I don't think it hands up as something that would repeat itself, but there might be other reasons.
Specifically going against the NFC.
Yeah. Let me ask it in the way that I would lead the witness here. Is that do you think that seeing Lamar Jackson for the first time, as a lot of the players who only play against him every 4th year, none of them having a scout quarterback that could match what Lamar Jackson does and could teach them to play defense against him. Do you think that's something that maybe NFC teams have a disadvantage of?
100%. And I think it's evident because in our division games, they play us close. KC and some of our AFC rivals, they play us close because of the familiarity. Some of these NFC teams, they've never seen a guy like Lamar. Now, maybe that someone like Jaden Daniels is in the NFC, they could be more up to speed on this gameplay. I'm not saying that Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson are the same player, but they bring some dynamics that can be interchangeable and have them a little more well prepped for that running style. But at the end of the day, I think this preconceived notion that Lamar is a running threat first and the passing threat second, I think that has died. And if they want to keep that narrative alive, please be my guest, because he will destroy you if that's your mindset.
I think maybe if I had to pill one other thing, I'd say just the Ravens during Lamar's entire career have been the unicorn of NFL offenses. And they've been either extremely good, but always extremely unique. Okay, so the 2019 team, they ran it right down your throats. They used misdirection all the time. Greg Roman's run schemes were new and exceptionally effective. They ran the ball over whoever they faced. It didn't matter if you were good stopping the run against traditional run offenses. You still couldn't stop the run against the Ravens. Yep. There's just too many other misdirection elements that are new. I think maybe there's some of that you're also seeing for the first time, or only seeing once every 4 years. And so you don't have an easy way to prep for it, even when you watch some films. Because one of the things I always heard from players from announcers like Phil Simms is that the easiest thing to underestimate about your opponent is their level of athleticism. So you look at this was in particular relative to 2000 Ravens. He said this in that game out in Oakland. Oakland was thrilled to play that game at home in the AFC Championship and thought this is a great chance to go to the Super Bowl. We're playing a Ravens team that has no business being here, kind of thing. And all they do is just perfectly normal, average stuff. We're lucky to not be going to Tennessee in addition, but they didn't think there was anything special about the Ravens. Then they get on the field with the Ravens, and the Ravens pose athletic challenges they were no match for. They were no match for, and wasn't Tony Siragusa falling on Gannon that won in that game, because Gannon wasn't playing well even before then. Yep. Simms made that point. I've always carried that with me for the last quarter century. That's something you can easily underestimate in your opponent, and I not seeing it on film is just far different from having to play against it.
Yeah, and Bobby Wagner mentioned it in 2009. I mean, 2019 when the Seahawks versus the Ravens. I mean, he verbally said that guy is ridiculously fast, and they don't want to see. They're glad they don't have to see him for another 4 years. So, when an All-Pro linebacker who's been in the league for a while is saying that about you, I think it's probably an echo throughout the league that the NFC is glad they don't have to deal with Lamar Jackson on a year-in, year-out basis.
Yeah. All right, got one more question here. It's from Alvindo Royale, one of our really loyal listeners. Appreciate you, Alvindo, as always. He says, it seems like this year's Lamar is expanding his uncanny ability to read leverage to now taking over the passing game. We all want the timing throws, but it looks to me like Monken is figuring out how to take advantage of Lamar's real superpower, his vision.
I think that's a very fair point. Lamar's vision has always been there. In terms of leverage, I mean, his running understanding of when to cut and how to cut is undeniable, but that passing vision is something that is underestimated in his game, especially when it comes to his understanding of the leverage and where to place the ball, because sometimes getting the ball there isn't always, it's half the battle. Placing the ball is the rest of the battle, and Lamar is someone who excels in that, whether it be right in between the numbers, or whether it be leading out in front, or even protecting his receiver back shoulder. He's able to make those throws, and that's what makes him so successful in those situations.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate this. It's really more of a comment than a question, Alvindo, because I think you've really nailed it right on the head. Lamar does want to see that route break, so he wants to view the field and see the point at which he needs to hit that receiver without having to figure out how that's going to happen after a break. And I do think that Monken's design is probably taking more advantage of that. And some of the things we've seen from Bateman, maybe in terms of that secondary move we talked about earlier down the field, is a real positive indicator that's coming to fruition. But really appreciate the comment, Alvindo. Good observation. I want to close out with one more note about this, and this is the golden age of looking up different stats on StatHead, what Bill James would have called freak show statistics, which are just combinations of statistics occurring in a single game. For example, like how many times has Lamar Jackson had 5 touchdowns and a perfect passer rating, or 5 touchdowns and no interceptions on Monday Night Football, and that kind of thing. There's a really good one from this week. So the Ravens with this game have now been 7 consecutive games, and they didn't in week 18 of last year. They didn't do it against the Steelers in a game that they basically rested everybody. But 7 consecutive games, they've outrushed their opponents by 100 plus yards. That is the second highest total of the second longest streak in National Football League history. So it's tied with 2 teams from the 1940s. The 1949, or the New York Yankees of either 49 or 47. I think it's 47 actually, and the Eagles of 1949. So it's been 75 years since any team has had 7 in a row and not more. No team has ever had 8. No team has ever had 6. So, they're already 2 ahead of this, relatively small still number of teams have ever had 4. I think it's about 9 or 10 teams which have ever had 5. So kind of laying out the framework for you. I did put this in a tweet separately so people know where the punchline is coming from. So anyway, there's one team that once had 9 consecutive 100-yard games. Outrunning their opponent by 100 yards in 9 consecutive games. You have any idea who that was?
19 Ravens.
Yeah, the 18 Ravens, 18 and 19 games. So it's Lamar's first 9 career games.
Wow.
And it ended, I think it ended with the Miami game. No, it was the second game. It was 6-1 with Lamar, 7-1 with Lamar. I'm not sure. First or second game, it was the last of 2019 was the last game.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it was a remarkable streak, and Jackson now has been involved in both of them. But just the unicorn will continue to show up in all kinds of freak show stats that we can construct. So
it's crazy. Since Lamar's been in the league, they've created so many different statistics to just put him at the top. I think it's it's been ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, it's been a lot of fun too, and Frazier, it's been a lot of fun doing this show with you. I really appreciate having you as my co-host for Matchups. That's been a lot of fun for the last season and a half or so that we've done that, and I think I'm proud of what you're doing. But tell folks where they can talk football with you.
Yeah, Ken, always appreciate you. I mean, you've given me opportunity, and I'm glad to be here talking football with you. Other people can find me on Twitter /X at F_Rave8. That's F_RAVE8.
All right. And if you're listening still now, I always say on the second show, thanks for all the loyalty. We really appreciate it. I'm not going to hit you up with a lot of things that you already know about how to do a short, but if you can do anything to pass this show along to some friend of yours, that'd be great. Show them where it is on the website. Show them how to play it directly from that. If they're not a podcast guy, help them download their first podcast and have it be Film Study if you would do that. Or barring all of that, write us a 50-word review on any podcast platform. 5 stars, please. We really appreciate that, and it'll help drive traffic to the show and help us continue to provide this for longer. Appreciate all you folks. And Frazier, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.